Hola, bienvenidos a la clase de español. Today I want to review el presente de indicativo, the present indicative, which we often refer to as simply the present tense. Now we use the present tense to talk about what's happening right now, or what generally happens. When conjugating regular verbs in the present tense, the first thing to do is drop the ending. So you're going to take the AR, ER, or IR and get rid of it from the end of the verb. After that, you need to add the appropriate present tense endings. For the AR verbs, those are going to be O, as, a, amos, ais with an accent on the A, and on. That's just going right through our verb chart, singulars, plurals, first person, second person, third person. For ER verbs, those endings are O, ace, a, amos, ace with an accent on the E, and N. And for IR verbs, O, ace, a, imos, is with an accent on the I and N. Now additionally, there are irregular verbs in the present tense, and we can break them down into different groups based on what pattern they follow as irregulars. And I'm going to break those down into 5 groups today. Now our first group is going to be irregular yo verbs. And for the irregular yo verbs, they're irregular only in the yo form. All of the other forms are completely regular. A few of these verbs are conocer, which means to know personally or be familiar with, dar, which means to give, saber, which means to know facts, information, or how to do things, and ver, which means to see. And those verbs are only irregular in the yo form. The yo form of conocer, conozco. All of the other forms are normal. The yo form of dar, doy. The yo form of saber, sé. And the yo form of ver, veo. So using one of my irregular yo verbs, I could say something like, yo sé tocar la guitarra. Now, perhaps you thought of some other verbs that are irregular only in the yo form that I didn't list in that first group. Maybe that's because I've actually put them into group 2, which I call go verbs. And these verbs are also irregular only in the yo form, but they all have one thing in common, and that's that the yo form ends in go. And a few of these verbs are hacer, which means to do or to make, poner, which means to put or to place, salir, which means to leave or go out, and traer, which means to bring. Remember, all of these forms are regular except in the yo form, and the yo form ends in go. So I could say something like, yo hago ejercicio todos los días. The third group of irregular verbs in the present tense are stem-changing verbs, which are also known as shoe verbs. Now, they're called stem-changing verbs because the vowel in the stem changes. And they're called shoe verbs because if you draw a circle or a box or a shape around the forms of the verb chart where the stem change occurs, where that vowel change occurs, it looks kind of like a shoe. So stem-changing verbs, shoe verbs. That stem change only occurs in the yo form, tu form, usted, él, ella form, and ustedes, ellos, ellas form. It does not occur in the nosotros, nosotras form, or in the vosotros, vosotras form. Now, all of these verbs have a vowel that changes, and it's always the vowel in the second to last syllable of the infinitive that is going to have that change. There are a number of different changes that can occur. We can have a U change to a UE, an O change to a UE, an E change to an IE, or an E change to an I. So for the U to UE changer, I just have the verb jugar, which means to play, as in games. For the O to UE changers, we have almorzar, which means to have lunch, contar, which means to count, dormir, which means to sleep, and poder, which means to be able to. Remember that these verbs are going to have an O to UE change inside the shoe, or in all forms except nosotros, nosotras, and vosotros, vosotras. For the E to IE stem-changing verbs, we have entender, which means to understand, hervir, which means to boil, pensar, which means to think, and querer, which means to want. For the E to I stem changers, we have competir, which means to compete, pedir, which means to ask for or request, servir, which means to serve, and vestir, which means to dress. So using a stem changing or shoe verb, I might ask you, ¿Entiendes el español? That brings us to our fourth group. Now our fourth group is kind of just a combination of what's going on in group 2 and group 3, because here we have a few verbs where the yo form ends in go, like group 2 verbs, and where the vowels in the stem change, as in group 3. So I call these go-go velcro shoe verbs. Now, a few verbs in this group are the verbs decir, which means to say or to tell, tener, which means to have, and venir, which means to come. Now, the yo form of decir is going to be digo, and then there's going to be an E to I stem change in the rest of the shoe. The yo form of tener is going to be tengo, and there's an E to IE stem change in the rest of the shoe. And the yo form of venir is vengo, and there's an E to IE stem change as well in the rest of the shoe. So we could use a go-go velcro shoe verb to have a conversation about school, and I might ask you, ¿Cuántas clases tienes? And you may respond, Yo tengo 6 clases. So my fifth and final group of irregular verbs in the present tense are los verbos super irregulares, the super irregular verbs. And this is kind of like just the catch-all group. Everything else had a pattern. Group 1, yo verbs. Group 2, go verbs. Group 3, stem change. Group 4, go and stem change. This is the group of verbs that don't follow any pattern like that. And I have 3 verbs to put in this group. Those verbs are estar, which means to be, usually giving a temporary condition or a location. Ir, which means to go. And ser, which means to be for more defining characteristics. Things like personality traits, physical characteristics, or things that define who someone is or what something is. Now, as a group, these don't follow any set pattern, so we just have to look at them individually. For the verb estar, the yo form is going to end in an oy instead of just an o, estoy. And we change the stressed syllable and add an accent in the tú, usted, el, ella, and ustedes, ellos, ellas forms. So we have estoy, estás, está, estamos, estáis, están. For the verb ir, all of the conjugated forms are going to begin with the letter V. Where does the V come from? I don't know. But they're all going to start with V. The yo form, just like estar, is going to end in oy, so we have voy. The rest of the forms are going to take our regular AR endings, but we don't need an accent on the vosotros form because that word, vais, has only one syllable, no accent needed. So altogether we've got voy, vas, va, vamos, vais, and van. Now, the verb ser just comes out of nowhere, I guess. We've got soy for the yo form, which is kind of normal. Starts with an S, ends with an OY. That's kind of been a theme so far, I guess. But then the rest of the forms, I don't know how to explain them, so let's just get to it. So for ser, we've got soy, eres, es, somos, sois, and son. No accents in that one either. So to use one of those super irregular verbs, I could say something like, Mi maestro de español es cómico. So that'll do it for our review of the present indicative in Spanish. We've got regular verbs, and we've got my 5 groups of irregulars. Gracias por ver este video. Adiós.